iFiddle folks, Geoffrey Fitzhugh Perry here. Glad to be back. Mike has asked me to do another little video ditty here, expounding upon my earlier videos that focused on improvisation. He asked me maybe if I'd tell you about some exercises, some arpeggios and what it means to practice. I can do that, but I have to warn you. It's a serious warning too. You can get lost in that stuff for sure. You may already know some of this stuff, and don't overstress it is my biggest warning to you at first. Players who over-practice scales and arpeggios get really good at scales and arpeggios, and they don't have much life in their playing or much identity stamp. Never really find their own style or their own voice or their own confidence, it feels like to me. And I'm not the only one to say that. Miles Davis said the same thing. Great famous improvisers have all said similar things. Wayne Shorter. So, does that mean you don't have to develop any vocabulary? No, of course. You do have to develop some. So I just precede it with a little warning. Don't take the stuff too far. And if you want to get good at improvising, improvise more. Don't just practice scales and arpeggios. But, that said, I will, in this short video, kind of go over some of the things that I did in my development stages. Now, I don't recommend my path. I was classically trained and did the whole 9 yards, Bruch, violin concerto, Mendel concerto as a young teen, and really working on stuff and practiced a lot. I got my technique together for sure. But I was also immersed, as some of you know, in the rock and roll world with guitar and bass guitar and other things, and had this weird double life going on for a long time. I didn't know how to line them up and put them on the fiddle for the longest time. So I did this technical, swoop-de-doop, and then I had this other stuff going on. I was like, well, how do I get this all to match up? And I had to kind of forget all that stuff for a while. And for me, it was almost a 20-year journey to try and find any kind of stylistic identity for myself. You don't have to do it that way. That's the long road, and it still continues to develop 20 years after that for me. But I recommend learning a little and assimilating it, like the plateau things. You gradually lift yourself up. Learn a little bit and use it. Jam with it. Play with it. Don't just study it. Yes, you can do transcriptions of other people's solos, and it's not harmful, but to take it too far is, in my opinion. So, here we go. What were the steps that I did? The first thing I did when I was younger and started learning to jam on the violin was learn blues scales. Minor pentatonics, all of them, in every key. I would start with G. I would put the flatted fifth in. And notice I'm not necessarily just playing the scale, I'm jamming around with them. If you want to get good at improvisation, improvise, right? Even when you're practicing, as I do in quotes. Then I'd go to G sharp, or A flat. Remember, it doesn't have to be fast. A flat's a little more awkward on the violin. Then I go to A. See how my fingers kind of fly over that one? It's a more used key for sure. B flat. B. See, I threw in some other stuff right there. I was inspired to do that right away. That's okay. You don't have to stick to this regimented thing. C. C sharp. Of course, D. Let's goof around with that in the little intro to this video. E flat. E. F. Etc. One more. F sharp. There you go. There's all 12. Some might argue that there's 15 keys. Of course, 7 sharps and 7 flats and one all natural. There is technically 15 different keys, but some of them are doubled, right? F sharp and G flat are really the same thing, and your fingers don't know the difference. Your head will if you're reading it. So I don't stress the 15 keys in improvisation stuff because your fingers don't know the difference. It's more of a muscle memory pattern. Anyways, just get your fingers used to doing stuff. Take your time. And that was the first step for me, blues scales, because you can get away with murder with blues scales over just about anything. Often you can do the blues scale of the overall key over just about a whole song. Not every song, but a lot of songs. You can get away with that. So that's a good thing to know. And also, once you know those first 12, you of course know 12 more because minor pentatonics are the same thing as the relative major pentatonic. What? Yes, it's true. So if you have, if you're classically trained, you know relative major minor, so G major is the same as E minor, right? It's the same thing in pentatonic. So if you know, you just have to reverse engineer it. If you know E minor, you of course know G major pentatonic. So there's E minor revisited. It's the same exact thing as G major. Again, E minor. And G major. My fingers barely know the difference. All right? Your muscles barely know the difference. My mind does, but my fingers barely do. Okay? So every relative major and minor are the same fingering. So let's see what some others. I don't have to go through all 12, do I? You get the idea. So G major and E minor are the same in the pentatonic world as well as the 7-note world. Let's see. How about D minor and F major? And F major. Same fingering. So that's cool. So you automatically know, once you know the first 12, you know 12 more. You know 24 different keys. All in the pentatonic world. All fiddle tunes are made out of pentatonics. All blues tunes, rock and roll tunes. Pentatonics gets a wide berth of styles. Okay, the next thing I did in my development was, after I became really good at milking the one scale fits all approach, taking it as far as some of you know, all the way to Newport Jazz Festival. I played with Gamelan, opening up for Miles Davis and stuff. After that, I kind of left the jazz fusion rock world and dove head first, trying to deepen my roots into Zydeco and Cajun stuff. It was really fascinating to me. And I did, a good 10-year stint in that style, playing not only with my own records, but with Leron Zydeco and the Hot Tamales as a group out of Buffalo. We did about 4 records together. And to go over that style with just minor pentatonics, it sounded kind of cheesy and unauthentic. Found it better to do major pentatonic over each chord as it passed. So in that style of music, it's 3-chord music. We call that roots music. That can be not just Cajun, that can be blues, it can be rock and roll, it can be fiddling. Is usually 3 chords, as many of you know. And in that, I use major pentatonic of each chord of the 1, 4, 5. So in any key, you have the 1st chord, the 4th chord, the 5th chord. Very popular stuff. It's 90% of all music, and from classical up. And you can study more of that stuff on my website, Fiddle Jam Institute. But I would do, say, in the key of G. It's G, C, and D. When it's on the G chord, I would use the G major pentatonic. When it turned to C, I'd as gently as I could, and as gracefully as I could, start in C, right from where I was at. When it gets to the D, and back to G. Now, if you have sharp ears, you might hear that I'm not doing it just strictly the major pentatonic. I'm throwing in the blues notes with it. Now, nobody knows what name this has, and I've bantered this about with other folks who are probably smarter than me and definitely more famous. Nobody has an exact name. I asked Daryl Anger if I could name it Mixo-Bluesian, because it's kind of a blues scale mixed with Mixolydian mode. He liked that. I like it too. It's kind of my own made-up version of this. So what it is, it's major pentatonic and minor pentatonic piled on top of each other. Check it out. If it's G, there's G major pentatonic, and here's G minor pentatonic or blues. So, and what I did is smoosh them together. Use the minor notes to slide with. The flat fifth is... So it's got the flat seventh in it as well. So I never practice this as a static scale. That'd be boring and ugly. But I do think of it as major pentatonic with the minor notes thrown as little swooshing, sliding notes. Isn't that cool? I would do that kind of approach on every one of the 1, 4, 5s in Zydeco. Gets to C, same thing. And D. Anything on G. So that's cool. I love that stuff because there's really no way to exactly write it and think about it, and there's not even any names for it. That's just that world. I dove in head first. So that was so cool. Even the beats. There's no way to exactly write them and stuff if you study that kind of thing. Very fascinating to me. As an uber-trained, overtrained person, that's part of my undoing of my overtrained earlier days, I think, part of it. There's stuff to know, but mostly it's just forget about it. All right, so we're getting to the end here. Now, as a jazz player, you do need to know a little more stuff. When I started playing gypsy jazz, the past another 10-year period for me, I found that the old blues licks were kind of in the way. My fingers needed to learn some stuff. So I had to actually shed when I started doing that style. What did I shed on? Well, I went back to major scales, a little more, and minor scales, in particular harmonic minor scales, and diminished arpeggios. Oh, yeah, there's more stuff to practice. I kind of groaned after all these decades of playing other stuff successfully. I said, well, it's cool to learn something new every once in a while. And what I shedded on was, at first, just to get my fingers ready for gypsy jazz. Of course, major scales were no big deal, and blues scales I can always draw upon at the end of a phrase to make punctuation, a little splash of something. But harmonic minor in the gypsy world is important, and it's awkward in the fingers. It's got that weird jump. So for the theory heads out there, 2, flat 3, 4, 5, flat 6, regular old 7th, a step and a half. Get a little bit of an Eastern flavor to it, the gypsy stuff. Stefan Grappelli and the Django Reinhardt camp, that's what they did a lot of. Everything minor was in that. Got that little bit of Jewish klezmer kind of cousins too. That does the same thing. So I had to practice those. I simply had to just, and again, I didn't run the scales, I would jam with them. I'd go up and down the neck, mostly in first position, I'd go into third position some. Just get used to doing that. And I started with the most popular keys. G minor, D minor, A minor are big in the gypsy world. It was a string band. They're more popular with the string keys, which thankfully. Horn, bass music is a lot of the flat keys. Why? Because it's easy for them. They're B flat and E flat instruments, and mostly B flat, so they're thinking in an easier key. So I have an argument about why should us fiddlers learn all those weird E flat minors and B flat minor and stuff to try and match them. I say just tune down a whole step to match them, period, completely. Because the horn player, a lot of the tunes are in B flat because they're really thinking in C, right? They're thinking in an easy key. They develop their style of music around keys that are easy for them, so they don't have to think too hard. Why should we have to double think? I have an argument with jazz players about that. Anyways, diminished. Another thing that just you need muscle memory. I practice the diminished arpeggios because those come in handy. So I started with diminished arpeggio there and ended on harmonic minor. It kind of smooshes one to the other. It's good to have those. Now, the cool thing about the diminished arpeggios is you only have to know 3, muscle-wise, because it's a scale that's equally divided within the octave. It's step and a half segments. In G, it's a step and a half to B flat, step and a half to D flat, step and a half to E, And you're at the G again, stepping half away again. It's kind of a mathematical oddity. And it sounds like a little bit of an oddity, doesn't it? But that, because they're all equally spaced, it means any one of the notes in that arpeggio could be the tonic. That's the same exact thing for B flat diminished. And D flat diminished. And E diminished. So if you practice the one set of notes, you're good for 4 different keys. So that leaves only 2 more in between, and you got every diminished scale arpeggio covered. So G flat, kind of awkward to our fingers. There's G sharp. Did I say G flat? G flat, G sharp. B, D, F, G sharp. Practice that one. That is also B diminished. It's also D diminished. It's also F diminished. What? Did my brain just have a fart? Sorry. Anyways, you get the idea. And there's A. Which is also C, E flat, and F sharp. Got it? So those are the things in my, in probably 20 to 30 years of study. I spent 10 years on each one. But not because I had to technically, I maybe spent a couple months shedding on those things in each case to get them technically together. Maybe when I was younger, longer on the blues scales. But that's the path I took technically. And again, I say the warning, 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 warning. If you want to get good at improvisation, improvise. Even when you're practicing, be practicing improvisation. Don't overthink it. Don't think you got to shred all the time and do these great things. It's all about controlling from inside you and playing exactly in a controlled fashion what you hear in your head. That's really what it's all about as an improviser. It's not about reciting licks and tricks. I've never studied anybody else's riffs, really. I probably picked them up through osmosis, which means they come from inside me then. The only lick I've ever ripped off from any other violinist was Eddie Jobson and the band UK. That was the coolest riff. I throw it in all the time. I know it's a cheap shot to throw in somebody else's riff, but that's the one I do. What was the coolest? I stopped the record and said, what was that? And Danger Money album. Eddie Jobson is not a hugely known player, but he's a great player. Back in the 70s, maybe it was the early 80s even. Danger Money, it's a fusion band. The guy that later became a singer for Yes and was a drummer. Can't remember. Anyways, Terry Bozzio was the drummer. Great band. Anyways, I got to meet Eddie Jobson one time way back in the 80s. Good guy. Just as he was joining Yes for a short stint, I think, as a keyboard player. Great violinist. So, anyways, blah, 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 blah. I warn you again, if you're going to practice improvisation, practice improvisation. If you want to practice scales, practice scales. But if you want to practice the scales so that you're better at improvisation, try to improvise with them as you practice. And you won't get lost in the weeds like a lot of players do. A lot of jazz students, they practice all these riffs and tricks for years, and they never really develop their own identity. And they kind of lose it. It's a rare bird that can get together the technical things, the freedom are based around those technical things, and find their own style. I think with the plateaued, learn a little, try a little bit, learn a little bit, play a little bit, you'll probably get to any kind of identifiable style in a quicker fashion than I did, say. All right? All right, peace be with you guys. I hope this helped. Hope it's not too long, and see you next time. Enjoy iFiddle.